Europe under attack, the death toll rises. The latest on the attacks that killed dozens in dual attacks at an airport and subway in Brussels. And President Obama vows to help track down those responsible while stepping up security at major transit hubs across the country. This is Evening Edition on KPBS. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Right now, the U.S. and the world are in a heightened state of alert following a series of explosions in Brussels. At least 34 people were killed and more than 200 were left injured. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for today's attacks on an airport terminal and subway station. The airport was closed and over 600 flights were canceled.
Currently, the police is still busy with the analysis of what's happened and trying to find evidence of these attacks. And we will assess tomorrow during the day whether we can reopen the day after tomorrow.
Several Americans were among the injured, including an Air Force officer and Mormon church officials from Utah. Officials say there is no credible threat to the U.S. following the terror attacks in Belgium. Authorities here and abroad have ramped up security at major transit hubs. Matthew Burgoyne of the Associated Press describes the scene in Brussels after the bombings.
Explosions rocked the Brussels airport and subway system Tuesday, prompting a lockdown of the Belgian capital and heightened security across Europe.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we have feared has happened. Our country and our citizens have been hit by blind, violent, and cowardly attacks.
Witnesses described the scene as chaotic.
It was total confusion. There were upset women falling down and crying. It was truly hell.
Belgium raised its terror alert to the highest level, diverting planes and trains and ordering people to stay where they were.
Terrorism has hit Belgium, but it was Europe that was the target, and it is the whole world that is affected.
European security officials have been bracing for a major attack for weeks and warned that the Islamic State group was actively preparing the strike. The EU's foreign affairs chief broke down during a news conference in Jordan, condemning the attacks.
But it's also a very sad day for Europe, as Europe and its capital are suffering the same pain that this region has known and knows every single day, being it in Syria, being it elsewhere.
The Belgian prime minister said there was no immediate evidence linking key Paris suspect Salah Abdeslam to the attacks. After his arrest Friday, Abdeslam told authorities he had created a new network and was planning new attacks. Matthew Burgoyne, Associated Press.
Here at home, authorities are urging security personnel, transit passengers, and local residents to remain vigilant. Lindbergh Field is observing a state of heightened security today. An airline traveler had to be escorted off his flight for making repeated terrorism-related comments. Investigators say the man is a San Diego resident in his late 50s. They say he made no threats and committed no crime. The attacks in Brussels have made things more challenging for San Diego passengers. Today, many say they are not giving up on traveling.
How do you stop that? What about that pilot that took that airplane and flew it into the mountain or whatever it was? How do you stop that? There's just so many crazy people in the world that you can't prevent some stuff.
It can happen to any of us. I can't live my life in worry all the time, though. It would stop me from doing anything.
Authorities transferred the man to a psychiatric hospital to be evaluated. The United Airlines flight to San Francisco left behind schedule but arrived on time. MTS officials are on heightened alert but say travel has not been delayed or interrupted for passengers. San Diego Police Chief Shelley Zimmerman says that her department is taking all necessary precautions and is cooperating with state and federal agencies. Governor Jerry Brown offered prayers to the people of Belgium on Twitter. Our coverage on the terror attacks in Brussels continues on the air on KPBS Radio and online at kpbs.org. On the campaign front, 3 western states are up for grabs in today's primaries: Arizona, Utah, and Idaho. On Saturday, the Democrats have races in Alaska, Hawaii, and Washington. Looking ahead, Hillary Clinton spent the day in Seattle, but her rival is right here in San Diego. As primary voting wraps up today, supporters for Senator Bernie Sanders are at the San Diego Convention Center waiting for their candidate to take the stage.
Hey, ho, ho! Corporate greed has got to go! Hey, show me what democracy looks like! This is what democracy looks like! Show me what democracy looks like!
KPBS reporter Steve Walsh is at the convention center now, and he has more on what they hope to hear from the presidential hopeful tonight.
That's right, Maya. People are already lining up to get into the hall here at the San Diego Convention Center. Bernie Sanders isn't scheduled to take the stage until 8 o'clock tonight, but that hasn't stopped supporters from feeling the burn all day in San Diego. A group of them marched to the convention center from City Hall, beginning at 11 o'clock this morning. Enthusiastic supporters chanted and held up signs. Throughout the campaign, the Vermont senator has appealed to middle-class voters frustrated by the economy, especially younger Democrats.
He's talking about student debt, which I'm stuck in student debt really bad. I'm $16,000 in student debt, right? And I have nothing to show for it, and there's a crap job market that's not even working for me. So who do you think I'm going to support?
They were not troubled that Sanders is running behind rival Hillary Clinton going into tonight's primary races in Idaho, Arizona, and Utah. Sanders would need to win 65% of the remaining votes, but supporters want him to stick through the June 7th California primary.
I'm going to stick through. I'm going to stick with him the whole way because it's important. His issues is important. He needs to get a good speaking spot in front of the convention. But I see him. He's in it to win it. He's in it to win it, and I'm not looking at the possibilities of him losing right now.
So here at the convention center, they're telling us that the main hall fits 10,000 people. They've also opened up a secondary hall, which holds another 10,000 people. So they're saying there's still room if people want to come down. By this time he takes the stage in San Diego tonight at 8 o'clock, we should have a pretty good idea if Bernie Sanders is any closer to his goal of winning the Democratic nomination. Reporting live from the San Diego Convention Center, Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
A message of hope to the people of Cuba. Today, President Obama presented his historic visit to the communist nation as a chance to move beyond a very complicated past. Despite enthusiasm in both the U.S. and Cuba for the new relationship between the former foes, the president acknowledged the deep differences that persisted, including on human rights and democracy.
I have come here to extend the hand of friendship to the Cuban people. I want to be clear. The differences between our governments over these many years are real, and they are important. I'm sure President Castro would say the same thing. I know because I've heard him address those differences at length. Thank you.
His address was carried live on Cuba's tightly controlled state television. They offered him a rare, unfettered opportunity to speak directly to the country's citizens about his vision for the future. And Cuban Americans are still wondering how closer relations with the United States might change their lives. Some San Diegans have a lot of hope, but also a lot of questions.
President Barack Obama addressed the people of Cuba this week, promising to bury the last remnant of the Cold War in the Americas and to normalize relations between the two countries. He's called on Congress to lift the Cuban embargo, which is still opposed by the Republican-controlled Congress. Some Cuban Americans, however, are questioning if the closer relations will have any effect on the quality of life in Cuba.
I tell my friends and stuff is, show me the rice and beans. Because that's people want, to better their lives, and you can't eat the internet.
San Diegan Dan Mera says the people of Cuba are not without hope, but they haven't seen any changes to their everyday lives. He says his niece is a dentist in Cuba and still only makes $75 a month.
My opinion, as long as the Castro brothers are there, there's never going to be any real change. When you have absolute power, that's my opinion. I don't think they're going to let it go.
President Obama's visit marks the first time in almost 9 decades that an American president has visited Cuba. Maya Trabulsi, KPBS News.
And KPBS video journalist Nick McVicker helped produce that story. A San Diego City employee testified in court today against former Mayor Bob Filner. Stacey McKenzie oversees maintenance and operations at Mission Bay Park and alleges that the former mayor groped her during a city event. Her case is one of two unresolved lawsuits against Filner and the city. It was filed after the city denied her $500,000 claim. Nearly 20 women accused Filner of sexual misconduct. He resigned in August of 2013 and later pleaded guilty to misdemeanor battery and felony false imprisonment and was sentenced to 3 months of house arrest. Taking aim at people who are trying to sway the decisions of the California Coastal Commission, a California state lawmaker wants to end private communications between commission members and those groups. The legislation by State Senator Hannah Beth Jackson of Santa Barbara follows a controversial decision last month to fire the agency's executive director without explanation. Supporters of Charles Lester claimed developers and lobbyists influenced his ousting. Some commissioners claimed it stemmed from his job performance. California's Attorney General is lending support to a move to increase transparency on police-involved shootings. Kamala Harris is backing an assembly bill which would require law enforcement agencies to file all their reports to the State Department of Justice electronically. Currently, most agencies still file those reports on paper, which causes delays. A separate new law requires agencies to file more detailed reports on shootings by police, including the injured person's age, their race, and gender. The Commissioner for U.S. Customs and Border Protection says he thinks body-worn cameras for all officers may be in the agency's future. Last year, Customs and Border Protection decided against full-scale deployment of body-worn cameras, but Commissioner Gil Kerlikowske, says that they may change in the future. Manufacturers say they've been eyeing the nation's law enforcement agency as a business opportunity with its 60,000 officers.
I think that we'll receive some support from manufacturers and others, given the size of that workforce, that would be very interested in developing a camera.
And he says the cameras now on the market don't hold up in the harsh border environment. For more from our interview with the commissioner, you can visit kpbs.org. Lumber Liquidators is paying California $2.5 million to settle allegations that it violated the state's air safety standards. It's the latest penalty for the company, which was selling laminate flooring made in China. In this case, Lumber Liquidators faced allegations that they imported flooring containing high levels of the carcinogen formaldehyde. Shares of Lumber Liquidators holdings are down more than 70% since questions about the China-made flooring surfaced last March. Would you like to know how good your hospital is at preventing infections? There's a new way to find out, as Cheryl Clark with KPBS News partner iNewsSource reports.
Most hospitals report their infection rates by individual facility. But with 2 hospital groups in San Diego County and many others across the country, those rates are combined, and consumers can't tell a hospital's individual rate. Now, a nonprofit watchdog group has made those rates available. Leah Binder is president of the Leapfrog Group, which is providing us with this data.
We report by bricks and mortar hospital. Now, right in San Diego, there's a great example of how important that is.
Take urinary tract infections, the kind you get from having a catheter. The report shows very different rates of those infections between UCSD's Thornton Hospital in La Jolla and its medical center in Hillcrest.
Hillcrest has a rate of UTI infection that's called 2.207 and Thornton 0.746. Now those numbers don't sound like they make much of a difference, but it means that Hillcrest has a very exceptionally high rate and Thornton is below the national average.
You can see the full chart at iNewsSource.org. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Cheryl Clark.
Marijuana is often prescribed to treat medical disorders, but what about the patients who cannot legally get the medication in their state? Associated Press reporter Kathy Matheson shows the veterans fighting for access to the medication to treat their PTSD.
Medical marijuana isn't legal in Pennsylvania, but former Marine Mike Whiter uses it anyway to treat his post-traumatic stress disorder. And he's used his camera to document other veterans who chose pot over pills.
The medicines made the anxiety and depression go away, but they also made every other emotion that I could ever possibly feel go away. I didn't feel anything. I was a zombie. I drooled on myself for 5 years.
Whiter is among a growing number of cannabis-using vets who hope their stories will persuade more state lawmakers and the Department of Veterans Affairs to sanction the drug. Researchers for the VA say there's no evidence pot helps PTSD, but they hope to have more data in a couple of years. About 40,000 vets have been diagnosed with marijuana dependence, a big increase since 2002. Experts say cannabis is less addictive than heroin and alcohol, but the potential for abuse still exists.
Like other addictions, it's a chronic disease, and the changes that are associated with it in the brain are very long-lasting and persist months or years after you stop taking the drug.
Advocates say that's why doctors should be allowed to help vets manage their use of marijuana.
And in fact, there are Veterans Affairs doctors right now that do know about cannabis as a medicine, and the only thing that they're able to really do right now is refer the patient out of the VA.
Whiter says cannabis eases the anxiety that stems from his combat tours in Iraq and Kosovo. And he contends over-medication poses a bigger danger to vets than marijuana.
It helps me. I'm unapologetic for using cannabis because it saved my life.
A veteran convinced it can save many more. Kathy Matheson, Associated Press.
In 1988, San Diego opened its first AIDS hospice, the Truax House. At the time, thousands of mostly gay men were dying of the illness across the country. The house in Bankers Hill offered a safe and peaceful place for AIDS patients to spend their final days. The city owns the house. Now it's vacant and will likely be sold soon. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen shares the Truax House's history and looks into its uncertain future.
From outside, the Truax House might look a little creepy.
So, let's go inside. Let's go inside. I haven't been in here in many, many years.
Yeah. But when you step inside...
Oh, they left. Oh, good. Oh, wow.
You can't help but see the beauty in its history. Not just because the house was one of the first AIDS hospices in the country, also because of its stunning craftsman-style design.
This is incredible. They left all the woodwork intact.
I'm here with Terry Cunningham, a retired county public health director. He helped raise the money to get the Truax House up and running.
Well, this was the common area that was used as like a combination living room, and there was a large television for an entertainment center.
The house is named after Dr. Brad Truax, a gay man, a physician, and a pioneering local AIDS activist. He died of AIDS the year the hospice opened in 1988. Cunningham says at that time, 4 to 6 people were dying of AIDS every day, and many were homeless.
There were people that were literally dropped off at this doorstep because people just had no place to go. All of a sudden, they would have an apartment and a partner or a family, and next minute they didn't because they had disclosed that they had AIDS.
Everyone agrees this house is historically significant for both its architecture and its role in the AIDS crisis. But the city hasn't been the best housekeeper, especially in the last few years when the house has been vacant. Holes are in the drywall, the roof needs replacing.
You know, the status quo is not working there.
Todd Gloria represents the Truax House neighborhood on the city council. Here he is at a recent committee meeting on the house's sale.
And as chair of the budget committee, I'm also mindful of the fact that I think it's unlikely the city would ever prioritize this for the kind of rehabilitation that would be necessary.
The high-end estimate for modernizing the house is $1.8 million.
We're coming out onto the deck from a little foyer that was used.
Gloria proposed selling the house on the condition that the city do a review of its historical significance. That process is just getting started.
We had to make it handicap accessible.
But Gloria's plan doesn't satisfy everyone, including Roy McMakin.
Historic designations do not prevent things from getting turned down. They're a speed bump from developers, but I think that it is possible that somebody would buy that even with a historic designation and be able to prove a financial hardship to restore it.
McMakin has another interest in the Truax House beyond its history. He's the president of the Friends of Maple Canyon. That's one of San Diego's most popular urban hiking trails. And the Truax House sits near the southern entrance. McMakin and others want to use the Truax House property to extend the Maple Canyon Trail and give it another access point, one with a gorgeous view of San Diego Bay.
It became, in my mind, really this like missing link to really creating the spectacular circumstance of a Maple Canyon. So when I found it was being sold, it just seemed like an irreplaceable loss. like I said, I think Maple Canyon could become one of the most impressive open space in a center city in the United States.
One problem is that part of that trail extension would have to go through private property, so the city would need the cooperation of the neighbors. But even with that hurdle in mind, McMakin says the city hasn't been listening to what community members want done with the house.
That Truax House has so many possibilities for public benefit and public use, and it just seems short-sighted. And I'm really at a loss as to why the city is just so anxious to sell it so quickly. It's bewildering to me.
The Truax House could have a future that would satisfy everyone. A developer has expressed interest in buying the property, restoring the house, keeping it as a public meeting space, and working to extend the Maple Canyon Trail. City staffers are looking into whether conditions can be placed on the property's sale to ensure some sort of public benefit. Ultimately, though, the sale will need the City Council's approval. That vote is expected sometime in the coming months. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
Students at Southwestern College are gearing up today for spring break by driving drunk. Well, sort of. School safety officials set up a driving course on campus and provided students with special goggles that simulate what it's like to be impaired. They blur your vision and mess with your depth of field. Nicholas Escala says he's never been driven drunk before, and he doesn't plan on it either.
Because people told me, like, you shouldn't drink and drive, but I don't know how it's like. So maybe that's why people do it, because they don't know how it's like and they think they can do it. But at the end of the day, maybe they can't.
Southwestern goes on spring break next week, and school officials are hoping this exercise will prevent crashes. Drunk driving is the largest cause of crash-related deaths in the state. A high surf advisory is still in effect until tomorrow night, but the skies will remain sunny and clear. Steph Davis gives us the full forecast in tonight's KPBS weather report.
Well, we have a very nice forecast to look forward to all across Southern California. However, the farther north you go across the Golden State, a little bit of a different issue. Looking at our regional satellite and radar across the southwest, you'll notice a couple of light snow and rain showers extending across Northern California, getting into Nevada and Utah as well. That's our Pacific storm system that's impacting much of the Pac Northwest and parts of Northern California. But the good news for our area is the bulk of that action will remain off to our north, so we're looking at a quiet forecast for the San Diego area. Satellite and radar closer to home, remaining quiet, not a whole lot going on here. Just some clouds building in, but other than that, largely dry over the next several days, and we'll notice a warming trend as well. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is the National Weather Service has issued a high surf advisory for our area throughout the day on Wednesday. So if you're heading to the beach, do watch for rough surf and strong rip currents. On land, though, things looking good tonight in Borrego Springs, quiet with an overnight low of 47 degrees. Cooler in Mount Laguna as temps tumble back to the 20s tonight, though we will remain dry. 36 Ramona, 54 in San Diego itself, 43 and dry tonight in Oceanside. Looking ahead to tomorrow, we'll see the jet stream lift, high pressure ridge building in, and that's going to allow temperatures to continue to climb across much of California, including the San Diego area. So you'll notice this warming trend over the next couple of days all across our region. Here's a look for your 5-day outlook for the coast. Sunny and warmer for your Wednesday with your high at 73 degrees, 70 and sunny 73 and sunny also for the day on Thursday. Temperatures moderate a little bit Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Still plenty of sun with daytime highs in the low 70s. Your 5-day outlook inland, warmer with sunny skies for the midweek Wednesday, high 74. Carbon copy of that as we head into the day on Thursday. Sunshine sticking around Friday, and the weekend looks beautiful with pleasant conditions inland Saturday and into your Sunday. 5-day outlook for the mountains, cooler for your Wednesday, though temperatures will continue to rebound. Back to the 60s we go Thursday, mostly sunny and warmer Friday, and then the weekend looks good across the mountains with comfortable temperatures in the mid-60s. Wrapping things up with your 5-day outlook for the desert. Plenty of sun on Wednesday, high 78. Temperatures really taking off Thursday and into Friday as we break into the mid to upper 80s. Weekend across the deserts looks good as well with blue skies Saturday and Sunday and highs at 84 degrees. Steph Davis, KPBS News.
I'm Gwen Eichel on the next News Hour. How to help 400,000 children in foster care beat the odds stacked against them. That's Tuesday on the PBS News Hour.
New research from Scripps Institution of Oceanography shows monarch butterflies have a pretty significant chance of going extinct in the next 2 decades. The research covers butterflies found east of the Rocky Mountains. The migratory monarchs lost about 84% of their population in the last 8 years. Experts say the decline greatly increases chances that the eastern butterflies will go extinct. One factor may be the lack of milkweed.
Recovery for the population really depends on the amount of breeding habitat, and breeding habitat really means the amount of milkweed that's available for reproduction. Monarchs rely exclusively on milkweed in order to reproduce.
The migratory flock has an 11 to 57% chance the population will shrink below sustainable levels in the next 20 years. The risk could be cut in half if the breeding area in Mexico's forests grows by a third. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening. Good night.